The storage unit where silence kept years of unspoken truth. A thick envelope slips under the wrong door in a building that forgets names as soon as the lights go out. Celia returns it by hand and meets Owen, the neighbor it was meant for. Inside waits a letter and a single address that forces two strangers to slow down and face what was left unsaid. Hallway light. The fourth-floor corridor carried the smell of damp fabric, cheap cleaner, and the thin metallic breath of an elevator that sounded tired even when it behaved. The ceiling light above the mailboxes did not fully flicker. It hesitated, brightening and fading as if the building was saving electricity for something more important. Celia Morgan took the stairs because the elevator button had jammed twice this week, and the last ride ended with a scrape that turned every voice inside into a whisper. Rain followed her in from the street. It clung to her sleeves, to her hairline, to the soles of her shoes. Each step left a small crescent of water on the tile that dried into dull gray marks. At her door she crouched for the usual stack: grocery flyers, a bill that felt like a threat because it used polite words, a notice from the electric company printed so small it seemed designed to be ignored until it was too late. Beneath it all sat an envelope that did not belong to her. It was thick, heavier than it should have been, rough to the touch as if the paper had more fiber than gloss. The name on the front was Owen Hale, Apartment 4C, written in dark ink with a steady hand that cared about clarity more than style. The corner had been torn once and repaired with clear tape laid down straight enough to look intentional. A dried rain line darkened one edge, stiffening the paper like a scar. There was no return address. The seal was clean, tight, unbroken. Celia held it under the hallway light and felt that quiet pressure some objects carry. Not from size but from what they might contain. She crossed the hall to 4C and knocked once. She waited. She knocked again, softer, the kind of knock that admits it might be an inconvenience. Nothing moved inside. No latch. No footsteps. No voice. Only the low hum of a refrigerator through the wall, and the occasional cough of plumbing in the floors below. The simplest choice was to slide the envelope under the door and let the error correct itself. It was the right thing on paper. It felt careless in the hallway. This building swallowed small things. Packages vanished from the lobby. Notices on the bulletin board got peeled off by hands that never signed their names. Shoes left outside a door disappeared by morning. Celia slid the envelope under 4C anyway, then watched it snag on the carpet, the taped corner lifting slightly as if it refused to lie down. She crouched, pulled it back out, and felt a flicker of guilt that made no sense. The envelope was not hers, yet her hand had made a choice. She told herself she would return it in the morning, face to face, so it did not sit exposed for hours waiting for a careless shoe or a curious eye. Inside her apartment the air was warm and still. A small lamp lit the table while the corners of the room stayed in shadow. Everything looked clean and temporary. A space arranged like it might be packed up in one night if life demanded it. Celia set the envelope down and stared at the name again. She had seen Owen Hale once in the lobby at dawn. Shoulders tight, eyes down, moving like a man trying to take up less space than his body required. She noticed him because his hands looked raw, knuckles dry and split, the kind of damage that comes from work that does not forgive mistakes. He did not look at the walls or the other tenants. He looked at the floor like it held instructions. That was all. A brief image. A posture. Now a name inked on paper, sitting on her table like a problem that refused to be small. Celia did not touch the flap. She did not lift the seal. She turned the envelope over once, then back again, then left it in her work bag as if it might try to wander off. When she finally lay down, she kept the bag beside the couch. She listened to the hallway through the door. She waited for a knock that never came. The building stayed quiet. Celia did not sleep well anyway. 2. The chain at 4C. Morning arrived pale and cold, with the sound of someone dragging a trash bag down the stairs, and the faint clink of bottles in a recycling bin. Celia carried the envelope across the hall before work, determined to return it before her day could swallow the intention and turn it into another unfinished task. She knocked. After a pause, the lock shifted. The door opened a few inches and stopped against a chain. Owen Hale looked out with eyes that scanned the corridor first and her face second, quick and practiced, as if he had learned to measure risk in the space of a breath. His hair was pushed back without care. A faded work jacket hung from his shoulders, the fabric worn at the cuffs, chosen for function, not for being seen. Celia lifted the envelope and said his name, careful with her tone. She explained it had been misdelivered under her door. Owen stared at the envelope the way people stare at a bruise they did not know they had. His jaw tightened, released, then tightened again. He did not reach for it right away. Celia felt a brief pulse of shame for keeping it overnight, even though the seal was still intact. She added that she had not opened it, that the paper was wet at the edge, that the corner was repaired with tape. Owen unhooked the chain and opened the door fully. He took the envelope with both hands, slow and controlled, like he expected the paper to change if he squeezed too hard. His thumb traced the tape line once, then stopped. His apartment was dim even though daylight pressed against the curtains. A single chair faced a blank wall. A small table near the door held unopened bills with corners curling up like dry leaves. The air smelled faintly of cedar soap and stale heat, and under that a sharper scent of cardboard like new boxes in a back room. Owen cleared space with one sweep and set the envelope down gently. He slid the edge of a key under the flap and broke the seal. One folded letter came out, then a small card. Owen read without moving. His eyes tracked the lines, paused, then returned to earlier sentences, as if the meaning refused to settle the first time. Celia stayed near the doorway. She did not hover. She did not leave. She watched his breathing change, slow then catch, like something inside him had shifted and he was trying not to show it. A letter can do that. It can bend the shape of a memory. It can make the past feel close enough to touch. Owen folded the letter again and set it beside the card. He looked up, not asking for comfort, asking for certainty. He wanted to know whether anyone else might have touched it, whether it had been left in the lobby, whether Celia had noticed a postmark. Celia answered what she knew and refused to invent what she did not. She described the torn corner, the tape, the rain stain, the way it snagged when she tried to slide it under his door. Owen listened like he was building a timeline out of scraps, the way a person does when truth feels too heavy to carry all at once. The small card held the name of a storage facility and a unit number written in blue ink. Nothing else. Owen stared at the address longer than he had stared at the letter. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed again. Celia stepped in far enough to set 2 glasses of water on the table. Coffee felt too intimate, too hopeful, for 2 strangers in a thin room. Owen drank once, then set the glass down with care, as if he did not trust his own grip. He finally spoke in short pieces. He worked nights at a warehouse on the edge of town. He kept to himself because being unnoticed was easier than being evaluated. The letter was from Maren Fitch, a person who had vanished from his life without explanation years earlier. He said her name like he did not want it to echo. He did not romanticize the absence. He described it as a clean cut that never healed clean. He learned to live around it, step over it, pretend it was not there. Now the letter sat on his table and the cut had opened again, not bleeding, burning. Celia stayed still, present, letting his words land without trying to turn them into a lesson. Owen looked at the card again. Confusion and caution moved across his face, quick and unpolished. He said the facility was local. He said he had never rented a unit. He said he did not understand why his name would be tied to one. Celia offered to drive him there after her shift. The offer was plain, not sweetened, not dressed up as fate. Owen studied her for a moment, then nodded once, as if he was agreeing to a risk he could no longer avoid. Celia felt the nod in her chest like a door opening a fraction wider. The unit where silence waited. 2 evenings later the rain had cleared and the air turned sharp enough to sting the lungs. Celia waited in the lobby with her keys pressed into her palm, watching the elevator light blink, and hearing the faint buzz of the sign outside through the glass. Owen arrived wearing a jacket that was too thin for the cold. The folded letter sat in his pocket, and the repaired corner of the envelope peeked out like a white flag he did not want to raise. He looked tired and focused, not dramatic, braced for impact. Celia drove because he did not offer, and she did not ask. The city slid past in wet pavement shine and brake lights. Owen sat with his hands still on his thighs, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, like he was trying to keep himself steady by refusing to look too closely at any one thing. They did not talk much. Celia did not fill the space with questions. She understood that some silences are not empty. They are working. The storage facility sat behind a chain-link fence with a keypad and a camera that watched without blinking. Inside the office, a clerk checked a file and slid a key ring across the counter with a practiced smile that did not reach the eyes. Unit 118. The corridor of metal doors was long and cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The concrete floor held chill like it was storing it. Owen stopped at 118 and held the key in his palm for a moment, as if he could feel the pass through metal. He unlocked the latch and pulled the door up. Inside, 3 boxes sat on the floor beside a folded chair and a scuffed suitcase. Nothing dramatic. Nothing staged. Just the quiet proof of a life paused. Owen opened the first box and went still. It was filled with letters, all addressed in the same handwriting, all sealed, each with a small date written in one corner as if time needed to be counted. The second box held notebooks wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. The third held a framed photograph turned face down, as if memory itself required consent. Celia remained near the doorway of the unit, close enough to be present and far enough to give air. Owen unfolded the chair, sat, and opened one letter. He read for a long time without speaking. The pages did not offer easy apologies. They offered an accounting. Maren wrote about obligations she had inherited and debts that attached themselves to her name like chains. She wrote about fear. Not fear of Owen. Fear of dragging him into fallout he did not deserve. She wrote about leaving as if it were a choice made with both hands shaking, the kind of choice that still feels like a crime after it is done. She wrote about working and sending money, about sleeping on couches and moving often. Not because she wanted adventure, because stability had become expensive. She wrote about shame so specific it did not need decoration. She wrote about missing him in ordinary ways, the empty seat on a bus, a grocery aisle he would have hated, a winter morning when her hands would not get warm. Owen paused, stared at the concrete floor, then went back to reading. Celia passed him a water bottle she had brought, and he took it without looking up. After another stretch he spoke, voice low and steady in the way people sound when they are trying not to break. He said he had spent years inventing explanations and hating all of them. The truth on paper was worse in one way because it was real, but better in another because it had edges he could finally hold. He was angry at Maren, and he was relieved she had not simply erased him. He did not soften it into something noble. He named it as it was, a mess of love and damage, and the naming made the air feel cleaner. He opened a notebook next. The writing inside was cramped in places and wide in others, as if Maren had written wherever she could, on breaks, on buses, at a kitchen table she did not own. It was not poetry. It was record-keeping of a life pulled apart and stitched back together in private. Owen closed the notebook and rubbed his forehead once, a motion that looked like fatigue and grief combined. Celia stayed where she was, breathing evenly, letting the room be what it was. They packed the letters and notebooks into the car carefully, keeping the boxes level as if sudden movement could spill the past. On the drive back, Owen rested his forehead against the window, eyes open, breathing slow. Celia drove with both hands steady on the wheel and kept the radio off. In the parking lot of their building, Owen paused beside the car. He did not reach for Celia, and he did not try to turn the night into a scene. He asked if she would sit with him another evening while he sorted the papers, not to read for him, only to be nearby while he did something he had avoided for years. Celia nodded once. The answer felt steady in her chest. Owen held her gaze for a moment, as if he was memorizing a small kindness before it could disappear. Then he turned toward the stairs. The envelope stayed in his pocket, and the boxes were carried carefully, one trip at a time.